I was a typical lonely farm kid. I grew up around the Susank area, and until I got married, so I was pretty much around the Susank area, being a just typical farm kid, just doing whatever I can get away with out there.
What were the big world events that like you remember when you were growing up affected you? Or?
Growing up, Vietnam. Vietnam was a big one. Before that, when I was in grade school, our biggest fear was nuclear war. You know, we would always have practices of hiding our heads under the desk, putting our heads between our feet, you know, between our knees, you know. But nowadays, all that was put your head between your knees and be ready to kiss your, you know what to buy.
What do you remember much about that drive-in theater? Like,
Yeah, I got a few pictures here that I acquired. Actually, I didn't take them, but some people were saying, "Did you want these?" I said, "Yeah." It was called Cheyenne View, of course. It was right across from Cheyenne Bottoms, and it was there from about mid '50s to about the mid '60s during the drive-in boom. And of course, my folks were farmers, so they didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't go to the drive-in a lot. But it's pretty neat to go out there. And then once that closed down, of course, the Great Bend had a drive-in. That's where I went to drive-in movies more when I was older and could drive.
What was kind of like your tradition, like one of your family traditions and stuff like
Labor
that?
Day.
Labor Day.
Labor Day was a big tradition in my family growing up, and the reason for that is my dad, or our family, had this old antique car, 1913 Glide, and that was always in the parade. I think there was only 1 year I actually stood and watched the parade when I was a kid, because I was always in the car with Dad. He would start getting the car out, about end of July, August, start working it over, getting it ready. Would get in it, and you know, when I was younger, we'd drive up to Susank and back, kind of get it revved up, and then he'd hook it on the back of the truck and pull it into town and drive it down Main Street.
Did you throw out candy or something like that in the back, or?
Not the first few years we didn't. When I was younger, we usually didn't. Now here later on, towards the probably the last 10 years, we kind of threw candy for a while, but then they said no more candy. You know, they wanted it just spread out, you know, along the side, so kids weren't rushing. Yeah. And Labor Day was kind of neat because they handed out a lot more things, a lot more novelties and stuff than
Not
they
just
do
candy,
now.
yeah.
No, the Rainbow Bread used to make little loaves of bread about this big, wrapped up, you know, just like a regular loaf of bread, and they'd throw those out.
What were some of like your most favorite or most visited like businesses that you would go to when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, there was so many here in town. Of course, you know, we had the Royal Theater in town here, which it's an empty lot right now. Of course, we had a Woolworths, which was kind of like a five and dime store that we would go to when I was a kid. There was a shoe store, sold brown shoes. A place called McDonald's, which had all your clothes and everything. It used to be where the car wash is now.
What was like kind of your favorite part of Hoisington?
Oh shoot! Favorite part.
That no longer is like here anymore.
Oh, Joe's, Joe's Bar. When I was a kid, just, you know, all little dime stores that you could go in. You know, when you was a kid, all the little things you could pick up. Of course, it was cheap back then to buy comic books and stuff like that.
Do you remember much about like was the railroad really big? When you
Oh
were
yeah,
growing up?
yeah. Railroad was a big employer, and it was nothing to have trains going back and forth all day long. You were lucky if you got down Main Street without being stopped by a train. I mean, it was they were constantly going through there. And my wife grew up here in Hoisington, and she would talk about how back in the day you'd still have hobos riding up and down the rail. You'd see them in the old open box cars, or getting out and walking around. And there was just stuff. The roundhouse was in full swing down there. It was a big, big employer, and there were just usually lots of trains going back and forth from Colorado up to Kansas City, hauling stuff back and forth.
If you could write like a message to your children or grandchildren from like 20 years from now, what would you say in that message?
Well, I'd say be true to yourself, know the Lord, and just, do the best you can. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in this life that change from year to year, changing all the time. Just be careful out there.